morning sun on Verdania IV was soft and golden. Not like the harsh white light of Earth. It came through the biodome glass and touched everything gently. The rows of alien crops. The small houses with their red roofs. The playground where children screamed and laughed and chased each other through the warm air. Captain Alara Voss stood at the window of the orbital relay station, high above the planet, and watched the colony through the long-range cameras. She zoomed in on the playground. There they were, her twin daughters, Mira and Sira, 7 years old, running barefoot on the soft blue grass. Mira was chasing a small flying creature that looked like a butterfly made of light. Sira was sitting in the dirt, building something with stones and sticks. Alara smiled. It was a rare thing, that smile. She was a war veteran. She had fought in the border conflicts near Proxima and had the scars to prove it. But here, watching her girls play on this peaceful little world, the scars did not matter. Verdania 4 was a small colony. About 4,000 people lived there. Farmers, scientists, teachers, engineers. It was far from the busy core worlds of the Terran Union. People came here because they wanted quiet lives. They wanted to grow things. They wanted their children to play under open skies. Director Hala Mubari ran the Verdania Learning Center, which was a fancy name for the colony's school and daycare. She was a tall woman with kind eyes and a voice that could calm any crying child. 300 children, from babies to teenagers, passed through her doors every day. She knew every single one of them by name. She knew their favorite foods. She knew their fears. She loved them like they were her own. That morning, Hala was organizing a nature walk for the younger children. They would go to the edge of the biodome and look at the strange plants that grew in the wild forests beyond. The children were excited. Little Tomas, who was 5, kept asking if they would see the big purple flowers that smelled like chocolate. Hala promised him they would. Nobody on Verdania was thinking about war. Nobody was thinking about aliens or weapons or politics. The galaxy was a big place with hundreds of species and thousands of disputes, but none of that touched this quiet corner of space. Until the ships came. They appeared on the colony's sensors at exactly 11:47 local time. 12 vessels, sleek and dark, shaped like the curved shells of insects. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel and took position in orbit around Verdania 4 without asking permission. Without sending a greeting. Alara saw them first from the relay station. Her smile disappeared. She recognized the ship design from intelligence briefings. Velthari, an insectoid species governed by a shared hive mind called the Nexian. They were known to be territorial and aggressive, but they had never had direct conflict with humanity. A communication came through. The Velthari spoke in a buzzing, layered voice. Thousands of individual minds speaking as one. They claimed that Verdania 4 sat within their ancient spawning territory. They cited an old galactic charter that nobody had read in 200 years. They demanded that all humans leave the planet within 31 hours, one full rotation of Verdania. Alara immediately contacted Terran Command and the diplomatic corps. Ambassador Kalen Dryce, humanity's representative to the galactic concord of aligned species, was pulled out of a trade meeting. He was a patient man, careful with words, the kind of diplomat who believed every problem could be solved with a conversation. He opened a channel with the Velthari and began talking. Down on the surface, the colony administrator announced a voluntary evacuation. There was no panic, not yet. People started packing. Transport shuttles were prepared. But there were only a few of them, and they were slow cargo ships, not built for speed. Getting 4,000 people off the planet in 31 hours would be very difficult. Director Mubari canceled the nature walk. She gathered all the children in the Learning Center's main hall, a big, bright room with painted walls and soft floors. She told them they were going on a surprise trip. An adventure The younger ones cheered. The older ones looked at her face and knew something was wrong. 22 hours passed. Ambassador Dryce was still negotiating. He asked for more time. The Velthari refused. He asked for safe passage guarantees. The Velthari gave vague answers. He kept talking because talking was all he could do. The first transport shuttle lifted off with 600 people, mostly elderly and families with infants. The second shuttle was loading. Director Mubari had her children lined up and ready. Then the sky turned white. The Velthari did not fire missiles or lasers. They fired something worse, a neural suppression pulse. It was a bioweapon designed to shut down the nervous systems of enemy populations so they could be captured without a fight. It was calibrated for Velthari biology. It had never been used on humans before. On adults, the effect was bad but survivable. People collapsed with splitting headaches. Some vomited. Some lost consciousness for a few minutes. They got back up, confused and angry, but alive. On children, the effect was a nightmare. Human children's brains are still growing. Their neural pathways are forming, branching, connecting in ways that adult brains do not. The suppression pulse hit those developing pathways like a hammer hitting wet clay. Children began to scream. Then they began to seize, their small bodies shaking violently on the floor of the learning center. Blood ran from noses and ears. Eyes rolled back into heads. Director Mubari crawled across the floor, her own head splitting with pain, grabbing children, holding them, screaming for help into a communicator that no one was answering. She held little Tomas as his body went rigid and then limp. She checked his pulse. It was there, barely. Across the colony, it was the same. Every child under 16 was hit. 197 children suffered severe brain damage in the first 10 minutes. Within the hour, 14 of them were dead. Up on the relay station, Captain Alara Voss watched the medical feeds streaming in from the surface. She saw the numbers. She saw the small bodies on stretchers. She saw the brain scans, dark patches spreading across images of tiny skulls. Then she saw her daughter's names on the critical list. Mira Voss, age 7, seizures, brain hemorrhage, coma. Sarah Voss, age 7, seizures, neural pathway collapse, coma. Alara did not scream. She did not cry. Something inside her went very quiet and very cold, like a star collapsing into itself before it explodes. She sat down at her communication terminal. She typed a message to Terran Military Command, a single line on an encrypted channel that would reach every admiral, every general, every commander in the Terran Navy within seconds. They heard her children. All of them. Send everything. She pressed send. Then she sat in the silence of the relay station, staring at the feet of her daughters lying motionless in medical pods, and waited for the galaxy to learn what happens when you harm what humans love most. The news hit Earth like a shockwave. It traveled through the quantum link communication network at faster than light speed, reaching every human colony, every space station, every ship, every home with a screen or a speaker. The footage was raw and unedited. Someone in the Verdania Medical Center had started recording and never stopped. The galaxy saw what humans saw that night. Small bodies on metal tables. Doctors working with shaking hands. A little girl, maybe 4 years old, her eyes open but seeing nothing, blood dried on her face. A boy, no older than 6, hooked to a machine that breathed for him because his brain had forgotten how. A mother on her knees beside a medical pod, pressing her forehead against the glass, whispering to a child who could not hear her. And then the number. 14 dead. 197 with severe brain damage. All of them children. On Earth, people stopped what they were doing. Factories went quiet. Traffic stopped. Restaurants emptied. In cities across the planet, billions of humans watched the same footage and felt the same thing. A cold, deep, terrible anger that started in the chest and spread outward until it filled every part of the body. There were no riots. There were no protests. There was something much worse. There was silence. In the halls of the Galactic Concord, the great diplomatic body where hundreds of alien species gathered to argue and trade and form alliances, the human delegations changed overnight. The Concord was used to humans being loud. Humans argued about everything. They filed complaints. They made jokes. They slapped each other on the back and laughed too hard at their own stories. The aliens found them annoying, charming, unpredictable. Now the human seats were quiet. The human diplomats sat still, their faces blank, their eyes flat. They did not argue. They did not file complaints. They did not speak to anyone. They just sat there, like stones. The other species noticed. Some were confused. Some were uncomfortable. A few were afraid, though they could not explain why. Ambassador Kalen Dreiss requested the floor. He was known in the Concord as a reasonable man, the human you could talk to, the one who always preferred words over weapons. He stood at the central podium, and for a long moment, he said nothing. He just looked out at the hundreds of alien faces watching him. Then he spoke. His voice was calm and steady, and that made it worse. He presented the medical data. He showed the brain scans. He showed the weapon analysis, how the Volthari neural suppression pulse was designed for their own species, how it was untested on humans, how the Volthari had fired it knowing there were children on the surface and not caring what would happen to them. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. When he finished, he said only this: "Humanity will handle this matter internally. We respectfully ask that the Concord not interfere." Then he sat down. The chamber erupted. Some species demanded explanations. Others called for an investigation. The Volthari representative, a tall insectoid drone speaking for the Nexian, insisted that the weapon had been a standard pacification tool and that the damage to children was an unintended side effect. Regrettable, it called it. In the back of the chamber, the Dralith delegation watched everything with ancient, golden eyes. The Dralith were one of the oldest species in the galaxy, reptilian, slow-moving, wise in ways that younger species could not understand. Their elder ambassador, a massive creature named Servan, had lived for over 800 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had seen wars that burned entire star systems. A younger alien diplomat leaned over to him and whispered, "Why are the humans being so quiet? Are they afraid?" Servan looked at the young diplomat with an expression that might have been pity. "No," he said. "They are not afraid. When humans go quiet, it means they have stopped thinking about whether to destroy you. They are now thinking about how." Across human space, something unprecedented was happening. Fleet Admiral Konstantin Reyes, commander of the Terran 7th Expeditionary Fleet, had received his orders from the United Terran Council. Not a limited strike, not a defensive deployment. The Council had activated the Total Species Level Military Response Protocol, a document written into humanity's founding charter 200 years ago, for exactly this kind of situation. It had never been used. Most people thought it was symbolic. It was not symbolic. Every Terran Navy fleet received mobilization orders. The 7th, the 3rd, the 12th, the reserve fleets, the colonial defense forces. Private military companies received government contracts within hours. Retired soldiers received recall notices. Civilian cargo ships were commandeered and refitted with weapon systems. Admiral Reyes stood in the command center of his flagship, the TNS Retribution, and watched the fleet status board light up like a Christmas tree. Ships were reporting in from every corner of human space. Destroyers, cruisers, carriers, battleships, dreadnoughts that had been sitting in orbital dry docks for decades, kept in reserve for a war that everyone hoped would never come. This was that war. Reyes was not an emotional man. He was 63 years old, built like a block of iron, and had a face that looked like it had been carved from stone by someone who did not believe in smiling. He had commanded fleets in 3 separate conflicts. He had never lost. But this was different. This was not about territory or resources or politics. He looked at the medical report on his desk. Page after page of children's names, ages, injuries, status. He closed the file and set it aside. How many ships do we have? He asked his chief of staff. As of this hour, 4,216 combat-ready vessels, sir. More are coming. Reyes nodded. It was enough. On the other side of the galaxy, the Valthari Nexion detected the fleet buildup through its spy networks and long-range sensors. The collective hive mind processed the information and found it confusing. They had expected a response, perhaps a retaliatory strike on one of their border outposts. That was how galactic conflicts worked. Proportional responses. Measured escalation. The Nexion sent a message to the Concorde. Why are the humans mobilizing their entire military force? We only attacked one colony. The message was read aloud in the Concorde chamber. Several species murmured. The Dralith elder, Sorvan, let out a long, slow breath that might have been a sigh or might have been a growl. A junior Concorde official, trying to be helpful, forwarded the question to the human delegation with a note asking for clarification. Ambassador Dryce read it, set it down, and did not respond. Later that night, the Dralith ambassador sent a private message to the Valthari Nexion. It contained no diplomatic language, no formal greeting, no polite structure. It said only this: you did not attack a colony. You attacked their children. There is no proportional response for that. Prepare yourselves. Back on Verdania, in the dim light of the medical center, Director Hala Mubari sat between 2 rows of medical pods. 183 children lay in artificial comas, their small chests rising and falling with the rhythm of machines. The room was quiet, except for the soft beeping of monitors. Hala held the hand of a small boy named Tomas. His fingers were tiny in hers. His face was peaceful, as if he were just sleeping, as if he might wake up at any moment and ask about the purple flowers that smelled like chocolate. She did not know about the fleets. She did not know about the speeches. She did not know that the largest military force in human history was being assembled because of what had happened in this room. She only knew that the children were hurt, and that somewhere out in the dark between the stars, something terrible was coming for the ones who had done this. She could feel it the way animals feel a storm before it arrives, a pressure in the air, a charge in the silence, a sense that the universe itself was holding its breath. And far away, in the cold depths of space, 4,000 warships turned their engines toward Valthari space and began to move. The Valthari Border Defense Network detected the human fleet 3 hours before it arrived. Long-range sensors painted the picture in cold numbers. 4,200 warships in tight formation, moving at maximum faster than light speed, heading straight for the heart of Valthari territory. The Nexion processed the data across its billion connected minds. It had fought wars before. The Valthari were not a weak species. They were conquerors, hive warriors who had crushed 6 smaller civilizations in the past 1,000 years. Their fleet numbered 1,800 warships, each one crewed by soldiers who felt no fear, no doubt, no hesitation, because the hive mind thought for them and the hive mind was never afraid. The Nexion deployed its forces along the border, a wall of dark, insectoid ships backed by orbital defense platforms bristling with weapons. It was a strong defense. Against any normal enemy, it would have been enough. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the Velthari border at exactly 0600 Terran Standard Time. Admiral Konstantin Reyes stood on the bridge of the TNS Retribution and looked at the tactical display. The Velthari defense line stretched across the screen like a dark ribbon. Reyes opened a broadcast on all frequencies. His voice went out in every known galactic language, reaching not just the Velthari, but every listening post, every spy satellite, every alien ship in the sector. The galaxy was watching, and he wanted the galaxy to hear. To the Velthari Nexion, he said. His voice was flat and calm, like a man reading a weather report. You used weapons of war on human children. You were given time to allow evacuation, and you chose violence instead. 14 children are dead. 197 more may never wake up. This is not a negotiation. This is not a warning. This is a consequence. He closed the channel and looked at his tactical officer. Begin. The Battle of the Velthari border lasted 11 hours. In the history books that would be written later, it would be described as many things: a massacre, a reckoning, a lesson. But those who were there, who saw it with their own eyes, used a simpler word. They called it a horror. The human fleet hit the Velthari line like a fist hitting glass. The first wave was the heavy dreadnoughts, massive ships that had been built for exactly this kind of fight. They punched through the center of the Velthari formation, their weapons firing in coordinated patterns that tore holes in the enemy line. Behind them came the cruisers and destroyers, pouring through the gaps, hitting the Velthari ships from the sides and from behind. The Velthari fought hard. They were warriors, and the Nexion directed their movements with perfect coordination. Their ships were fast, and their weapons were powerful. They destroyed hundreds of human vessels in the first hours. Debris filled the space between the fleets. Twisted metal, frozen bodies, the burning remains of ships from both sides. But the humans did not stop. They did not slow down. They did not retreat. When a human destroyer lost its engines, it fired its remaining weapons until its ammunition was gone, and then it turned its broken hull toward the nearest Velthari carrier and rammed it at full speed. When a human fighter squadron ran out of missiles, the pilots flew their ships directly into the hangar bays of Velthari warships and detonated their reactors. When a human cruiser was surrounded and cut off, its crew fought with manual weapon systems, firing by hand after their targeting computers were destroyed until the ship came apart around them. It was not madness. That was what the watching galaxy could not understand. The humans were not out of control. They were perfectly controlled. Every suicide run was calculated. Every ram was aimed. Every sacrifice was chosen with cold, clear precision. This was fury, not wild and hot, but cold and sharp, like a blade made of ice. The Velthari Nexion had never encountered anything like it. The hive mind processed the battle data and searched its collective memory for a comparison. It found none. Every species the Velthari had ever fought had a breaking point, a moment where the cost became too high and they pulled back. The humans did not have that point. Or if they did, it was somewhere far beyond anything the Nexion could calculate. By the 5th hour, the Velthari defense line was broken. By the 8th hour, their fleet was in full retreat. By the 11th hour, it was over. The Velthari had lost 1,400 ships. The remains of their navy scattered into deep space, running for the safety of their core systems. The human fleet had lost 900 ships and over 60,000 sailors. Admiral Reyes read the casualty report and set it aside. He did not pause. He did not mourn. There would be time for mourning later. Now there was work to do. The fleet pushed forward into Velthari territory. What followed over the next 3 weeks was not a war. It was a dismantling. Reyes moved through Velthari space like a surgeon cutting away diseased tissue. He did not attack cities. He did not bomb civilian populations. He was precise and methodical, and that made it more terrifying, not less. He destroyed every military shipyard, every weapons factory, every ammunition depot, every communication array that the Velthari military used. He found their research stations where the neural suppression weapons were developed, and he turned those stations into clouds of dust. He found their training facilities and their command centers and their supply lines, and he broke every single one of them. The Velthari tried to fight back. They organized counterattacks with whatever ships they had left. The Nexion threw everything it could at the human fleet, armed civilian vessels, ancient warships pulled out of museums, hastily built defense platforms. None of it was enough. The humans swept them aside like a hand brushing away insects. In the Galactic Concord, emergency sessions ran day and night. Alien diplomats argued and shouted and demanded action. Some called for sanctions against humanity. Some called for a peacekeeping force to stop the advance. Some simply sat in their seats and stared at the tactical feeds with wide, frightened eyes. The Dralith elder, Sorvan, attended every session but said nothing. He sat in his chair like a mountain of gray scales, watching the other species panic with an expression that was impossible to read. Finally, a young diplomat from the Kiresi species, small, furry, known for their emotional sensitivity, stood up and addressed the chamber. "This is genocide," she cried. "The humans are destroying an entire civilization. We must stop them." Sorvan opened his eyes. The chamber fell quiet. When a Dralith elder spoke, everyone listened, because the Dralith had been old when most of these species were still learning to use fire. "They are not committing genocide," Sorvan said, his voice deep and slow. "They have not killed a single Velthari civilian. They are destroying the ability to make war. There is a difference." He paused. "And I will remind this chamber of something. We told you. When the reports came from Verdania, we told all of you what would happen. Several of you laughed. The Kiresi delegation, if I remember correctly, said that humanity was too divided to mount a serious response." He looked at the young Kiresi diplomat. "Are they laughing now?" The diplomat said nothing. Sorvan settled back into his chair. "You do not touch their young," he said quietly. "This has always been the rule. The Velthari chose to ignore it. What comes now is not genocide. It is education." Deep in Velthari space, a single drone soldier stood in the ruins of a destroyed military base. It was a unit of the Nexion, one mind among billions, but the connection to the hive was weak here. The communication arrays were gone. The great web of shared consciousness was full of holes and static. For the first time in its existence, the drone soldier had to think alone. And alone, standing in the ashes of everything its species had built, it thought a very simple thought. We should not avert their children. Above the ruined base, human ships moved through the dark sky like predators, heading deeper into Velthari space, heading toward the homeworld, and they did not stop. The Terran Armada arrived at Veltharis Prime on a Tuesday. It was not a battle. There was nothing left to fight with. The Velthari homeworld had once been protected by 300 orbital defense platforms, a permanent fleet of 400 warships, and a planetary shield generator that was considered one of the finest pieces of military engineering in the galaxy. Admiral Reyes had destroyed all of it in the 3 weeks it took his fleet to cross Velthari space. By the time the human ships took position in orbit around the homeworld, the only thing between them and the surface was empty space and silence. 4 billion Velthari lived on that planet. Workers, builders, thinkers, breeders. The vast majority of them had never held a weapon, had never made a decision about war, had never even been aware of the colony called Verdania until the humans came knocking at their door with fire in their hands. Reyes looked at the planet on his view screen. It was a brown and green world, covered in massive hive structures that rose from the surface like mountains. Millions of lights flickered across the dark side. Cities, homes, lives. He could destroy it. He had the firepower. One command, and Veltharus Prime would become a dead rock. His officers knew it. The Velthari knew it. The entire galaxy, watching through long-range sensors and spy satellites, knew it. He did not give that command. Instead, he opened the broadcast, again on all frequencies, again in every language, again for the whole galaxy to hear. What he said next would be studied in diplomatic academies and military schools for centuries. To the Velthari Nexium, your military is destroyed. Your weapons are gone. Your ability to wage war no longer exists. You are defenseless, and you are alive. Remember both of those things. Then he read the terms. The Velthari would surrender all remaining military assets permanently. They would never rebuild a military force without human approval. Every node of the Nexion that participated in the decision to fire on Verdania would be identified and handed over to Terran authorities. The Velthari would fund, for as long as it took, the complete medical care and rehabilitation of every child injured in the attack. They would dismantle their entire neural suppression weapons program under human supervision. Every piece of research, every prototype, every blueprint would be destroyed. And then came the final term, the one that made the galaxy hold its breath. If any human child currently in medical care on Verdania dies from injuries caused by your weapon, from this day forward, Reyes said, one Velthari hive world will be sterilized for each death. The Concord chamber erupted. Alien diplomats screamed protests. Some called it barbaric. Some called it a war crime. The Curesi delegation walked out. 3 other species joined them. Ambassador Kalen Dryce, who had been silent for weeks, stood up. He looked tired. The man who once believed that every problem could be solved with a conversation looked like he had aged 10 years. But his voice was steady when he spoke. I understand the objections, he said. I do. I helped write these terms, and I understand how they look from the outside. So let me give you some context. He paused. When I was given this assignment, I sat in a room with Admiral Reyes and his staff. I asked the Admiral what terms he wanted to offer the Velthari. His original terms were 1 sentence long. Dryce looked around the chamber. I will not repeat that sentence, but I will tell you that what you just heard, the terms that many of you are calling barbaric, those are the gentle version. Those are what mercy looks like when you have hurt the children of a species that would burn the galaxy to keep its young safe. The chamber was quiet. Humanity did not start this, Dryce continued. We built a farm on a quiet planet. We sent our children to school. We were growing food and studying flowers. And the Velthari looked at our children and decided they were acceptable losses in a land dispute. His voice hardened just slightly. 14 families are planning funerals for children who were playing in a garden 3 weeks ago. 183 more families are sitting beside medical pods, praying to whatever gods they believe in, hoping their sons and daughters will open their eyes again. Those are the facts. And now the Velthari will live with the consequences of what they did. He sat down. Nobody spoke. The Velthari Nexion, fractured and desperate, sent a message to the Concord begging for intervention. They asked for a peacekeeping force. They asked for protection. They asked for anything. The Concord voted. The motion to intervene on behalf of the Velthari failed by a wide margin. Not because the other species agreed with humanity. Many of them were horrified by the terms. The motion failed because they were afraid. They had watched humanity dismantle a galactic power in 3 weeks. They had seen what 4,000 ships could do when driven by something deeper than strategy. No one wanted to find out what those ships would do if someone got in their way. The Dralith voted against intervention. When asked why, Sorvan said simply, because it would not